Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kvetchfest. I'm Jen,
I'm Debbie.
and today we're going to talk about aging and all the things that come up with that topic. Emotions, feelings. Are emotions and feelings the same or different? I can't. Why do I always get those two mixed up? Anyway, I don't know. Are they? Now that's a whole. Now I'm just thinking about that. Emotions versus feelings. Okay. Anyway, that's off topic. What were you going to say?
I was going to try to weigh in on that, but I'm not going to right now.
Yeah.
I'll have to look that up. I was going
Yeah.
to try to say something profound like, what comes first, the emotions and the feelings, or the feelings and the emotions? So you have a feel and then you have an emotion, or you have an emotion and then you have the feel.
I don't know. I just need that wheel from my therapist that has all of this. Because
There's
she'll
a
ask me
wheel.
in therapy, yeah, she'll be like, "Well, what are you feeling right now?" And I'm like, "Well, I think that this is how I should do this thing." And she's like, "Well, you didn't actually address how you're feeling." And I was like, "Oh,
Oh, yeah. That's the
yeah,
standard operating procedure.
yeah,
That's a thought.
it's
That's a
fun,
thinking. That's a rationale.
yeah,
That's intellectualizing. It's not actually
yes,
feeling.
right." She's like, "You're very
Yes.
logical. You're thinking about things, and but." What are you actually feeling in your body? And I'm like,
Right.
oh, I'm uncomfortable.
Right.
I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah. No,
Anyway,
that's how
this
aging
is
makes me feel.
that's well, good segue. Wait for me to derail the whole intro there. Way to bring it back, Mom.
Thank you.
Yes, hats off to you. Uh, so, how does aging make you feel, Mom?
So I can't start out with the sentence with I think because that is not feeling.
Correct.
Right. Well, that's what I'm dealing with as I get older is how does it make me feel? And I guess at times it makes me feel anxious, to be perfectly
Yeah.
honest. And I don't know if any other people in my age bracket feel that way, but I suspect they do. We just don't talk about it. But there's a feeling sometimes of anxiety over aging. And not the anxiety of necessarily mortality. That's part of it, definitely. But for me, it's the anxiety of what is aging going to look like as I have the privilege of still being able to age, right?
Right.
And how do I keep myself from becoming sort of insignificant in my own life based with the idea that I won't get, let's say, the onset of dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that, looking forward to having my brain. How do I keep my body vital and my mind vital as I'm aging? I think
Yeah.
that's the anxiety that I find myself sometimes thinking about. And I think part of that is because I'm retired and I have more time to think about that.
Right.
And also because my body is going through things that if I were a doctor, I'd say, oh, well, that's textbook. That's what we expect. And this is what we do to delay or prevent. And so I remember when I turned 60, which is unbelievably 7 years ago, when I turned 60, I remember I went through a couple of textbook things that this is what happens when you're 60. And one of them was I've had floaters in my eyes when I was younger, but I
Yeah.
never really understood. I never saw one actually happen before my eyes. But I was in the bathroom getting ready to brush my teeth or whatever, and I had this burst of light in one of my eyes, and then all of a sudden I realized I must have given birth to a floater because then I had all this
Whoa.
debris and this black thing, and I went out to where my husband was, and I said, well, I don't think I had a stroke, but it felt like maybe it was like that feeling. And
Whoa,
so the
that's scary.
very next day I called my eye doctor and he checked me out because that could be also a detached retina. And then he
Oh,
explained
okay.
to me at 60 what happens to the viscous fluids in your eye and how it's like jello. When you make jello, it's all jiggly and sticks to the sides of the bowl. And as you keep jello in your refrigerator, you notice that the jello shrinks away from the bowl. Well, that's
Oh,
what's
yeah.
happening to that,
Oh,
to the,
that doesn't sound
yeah,
fun.
in your eye. Yeah. And so you can get a, God forbid, a detached retina. Although they can fix that, it's still not pleasant. But this was just a floater, because there was no pain involved or anything. And I was glad it wasn't a detached retina. But when I went in, I'm like, oh yeah, I turned 60. Bam, floater.
Welcome.
Right, right.
Welcome
So,
to 60s.
Well, welcome to 60, So, and I remember having a few other things that were also 60-ish, which I can't recall right now, but I thought, oh, okay.
Is that because of your age? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, pretty much. Exactly like my age. And then just noticing how my body it's not as fluid as it was before, and how I have to make it fluid by making sure I stretch and exercise and walk and all that good stuff that I need to do to do that. And if I don't do that on occasion, then I'm like, oh yeah, now I know why I feel stiff. So I wasn't expecting these things to kind of like just like you're fine, and you're moving along and you're just fine, and you get all the way through your 50s, and then all of a sudden you get in your 60s and things start to like you're the Tin Man from the Wizard of Oz. I'm like, what
Just things falling off of you.
Yeah, well, things not moving.
Bring your oil around with you everywhere.
You have to bring my oil can around with me. Like I had this hip thing. You remember? I had this hip thing that all of a sudden happened that I never had before, and I'm like, why do I have a hip
that's also because
thing?
you broke your ankle, though, right? I mean, I think that's related.
Yeah, it was probably, but
Everything's connected.
Everything's connected. But that was a while back. But I think it's because my gait has probably changed over the years because of that. Right. Yeah. But so I went for physical therapy and tried to help me with the thing, and then finally I just started doing stretching. Was really, I mean, the PT was good because it was exercises, but really, I think the stretching was the thing that really helped me out. But for a while, I was thinking like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a thing, and I'm going to be happy, and I'm going to be in chronic pain. I started to have anxiety about those kinds of things. And,
I relate to that because they say this about your 30s too, your joints start to seize up and stuff, but for me it's like the last year or so I've been dealing with like very chronic IBS symptoms, and I'm learning that it's totally involved with my mental health, which is frustrating. But yeah, moving your body kind of changes the game. At least it has been for me, and I think I have to just keep that up because it gives me anxiety to have the symptoms, right? And then you living with like this dual anxiety of just like your regular anxiety and then the anxiety about the symptoms you're having or your body's changing or anything around that, which is frustrating and scary. And you're like, how is this? Can I change this? Is this changeable? Is this preventable? What are the steps I need to take, both mental health wise? Like, what are the things that I can do for myself for free right now versus like, do I have to go and be seen by a doctor and all of those things? So yeah, it's very complicated. So I totally relate to you when you're talking about, your body changing and finding ways to maintain the strength and maintain doing things that's going to be helpful for your mind and body, because they're not separate really. They function pretty integrally integrated. They function together.
Integrally. Yeah. Perfect. They function together. No, I totally agree with you. I think that the problem with being human is that we can talk ourselves out of doing things. And even though we know that they're good for us. And so what I've been doing, because up until recently, I was I think the pandemic made me a little less active than I was before, but we decided that wasn't going to be how it was. So we basically figured out where most of the parks were in our area, and we just went to all these different parks and walked and got out, because we couldn't be around people, but we could be in areas where there was expanses of area and we wouldn't have to be right up near people. And so we discovered a lot of great places to walk, and we had a good time doing that. And then I think there was I just felt a heaviness during that time, which prevented me from doing some of the other things I would have normally done. But, and then working forces you to be active because you're constantly moving, and I was in the classroom, so I was always moving
Your
around,
job
and
in
yeah,
particular. Yeah.
my job did
My
not.
job, no.
Yeah, my job does not lend itself to a lot of desk work, but
You
until
you didn't
after
have like a very
hours.
sedentary lifestyle. Right.
No, no, and then I
Because your
did
job
things with
wasn't sedentary.
right, and recess was a time, and the teachers would, those of us on yard duty would walk, with kids or without kids, and walk the field and do stuff like that at times. But when I came home and retired, I felt like, oh, well, now I can have a break from that. But you can't have a
Right.
break. There's no break from that.
I
You have to
know.
figure out a different way. So now what I do is break up all that activity during the day, because sometimes thinking about a 45-minute workout is not something I want to think about. But if I can,
Yeah.
if I can break it up into three 15-minute workouts, or a half an hour and 15 minutes, or whatever it is, or do stuff, I kind of I've started thinking like a child, and you know how children are always moving?
Yeah.
I feel like older adults should be
Be moving
moving
too.
quite a lot
Oh
as
yeah.
well.
Well, you hear that the adults that live a long time, they have very active lifestyles, not in the sense of like exercising for an hour a day, but parking their car far away from the grocery store and
Right.
walking in, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, sitting on the floor and getting up from the floor and not sitting on the couch because that helps your core and it strengthens your legs and all that stuff.
Right.
Cooking for every meal, doing your laundry, all these things that are
Right.
just you're moving your body in typical ways, but just doing that daily. So, yeah, I think our Western lifestyles don't really allow us to have the full range of motion of our body in our daily lives because we sit at the table and then we sit on the couch and we don't really get up and down from the floor a lot. Maybe we have stairs in our house, maybe we don't. But yeah, our day to day isn't really set up for that. So we have to figure out ways to integrate regular movement like that. That's not, I mean, it's exercise, but it's not like how we think about it now, which is like, oh, do a 60-minute workout and then you're good. That's not
Right.
necessarily true.
Right. I mean, I think that,
Yeah.
the whole 10,000 steps thing and all that. You're right. I think that sometimes when we box it in as a workout, it's fatiguing and we don't want to do it. So that's why I
Right.
think they have these things called exercise snacks now, where you do small periods of movement throughout the day. They've done research on animals, and actually our predecessors, the nomadic people that were here before us, who, they're not exercising all day long. They have spurts of exercise throughout the day.
Oh, the zoomies.
Yes, yeah, things like
Cats and
that.
dogs
Yeah,
have the zoomies,
or
yeah.
or running after prey, or
Right.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or hunting.
Well, yeah, or hunting. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we have talked about exercise before, but I feel like because of the IBS thing, I'm like, okay, it can't just be I do this for the next couple weeks. It's like probably gonna have to be a lifestyle shift for me
Yes.
and integrating exercise into my daily life. And I get anxious about staying consistent because I know what happens to me. It's like I'll do it for like 2 months and then I'm like, cool, and then it trails off. So how do I remain consistent, which is like what you're talking about, remaining vital and having energy to do things and keeping your strength and your body like lubricated for like movement and just so that you can get around when you're older. It's super important because when I was working out this morning, I was like, okay, yeah, when I'm 60, I want to be strong, so this isn't just the next 6 months, Jen. This is the next step, your life. Like, it's just going to
Right.
be part of your life now. And you just
Right.
have to really have a mindset that, like I titled my workout in my phone, you like to move your body. Because I get overwhelmed too by working out, but I do like to move my body. So that's a good reminder for me about why I'm doing it. Because if I don't get out of bed and just hit the ground running, then I won't do it normally. I think I have to do it in the morning and just put on my workout clothes and just do it and then be
Right.
done and then be like, okay, cool. Because then I feel, then you can take a shower and then you feel kind of motivated for the rest of your day because it makes you feel kind of rejuvenated and alive after a workout. And I'm starting to already feel the effects of my mental health, and my IBS symptoms kind of diminish a little bit, knocking on wood here because,
Right,
so
sure.
I don't think it's going to ever fully go away, but at least I'm already noticing the mental health aspect and the brain gut connection is already regulating again when it was so dysregulated. I asked my therapist, I said, "Can you feel your cortisol levels in your body go up?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's what that is." Because I've been feeling my cortisol just be, whew, just skyrocket, just totally working off, being what's not high strung, but just like so stressed and just working from a place of depletion rather than nourishment. So yeah, I think, moving your body, doing crosswords, doing things that invigorate your mind, doing new things. Like that's what they say to keep your relationship, if you have a romantic relationship, to keep it exciting is to go do new things together because then you have stuff to talk about and it helps your brain create more neural pathways and all of that. So there's lots of things that you can do to, I'm not going to say stay young because I don't think that's the goal. I think it's just to stay, consistent. I don't know
Alive.
what's, stay alive. Thank you.
Stay
Yeah. I
alive,
was like,
stay alive comfortably
yeah.
with not too many medical interventions and medicine.
Right. Yeah.
I
Right. Yeah. Because I think people are overprescribed. No, I don't have any problem with meds whatsoever. I think great. We have them. We should use them. But I do think, yeah, it's like, yeah, having that internal dialogue with yourself first of, okay, if I go on the medication, that's fine. Are there other ways that I can still help myself too that will help the medication or not or whatever? I don't know. But yeah, I think there's so many tools now that we have at our disposal to stay alive, like you said.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, to be, comfortable and not, I think that, sure, there's time to relax and there's time to settle in and not have to be working all the time, whether it's exercise work or work. And you do need to allow your body to rest as well. But I think for older adults, resting too much is not a good idea.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and like you said, it's not just the body that will start to seize up, but it's also your mind. If you're
Right.
not engaged in things that you enjoy. There are times I enjoy plunking down in front of Netflix and just sitting there and watching TV, but I
Me
also
too.
realize that during that time, I need to pause and get up and move around because it's just not
Right.
comfortable after I get up. So for
Well,
a
yeah.
certain length of time. So, and
Yeah.
I wasn't anticipating that. I think that, sure, there's some people that have more agility for longer periods of time in their life, and there's some people who don't. And I wasn't expecting that my body was going to remind me that I'm getting older on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's what is really kind of illuminating to me.
Right.
And I don't want to talk too much. I mean, I am obviously talking about it and being vulnerable about it because when you talk about it, your people who are in your age bracket, may judge you and say, well, we're not having these problems. Why are you having these problems? Or we're having problems. We really want to talk about it. But I think that it's important to know that these are normal things that you might start feeling, but your body might start feeling, but don't allow yourself to go down that rabbit hole and say things like, well, it's because it's because I'm 60, it's because I'm 45, it's because, I'm getting older. No. I've
I
had
know.
to change the dialogue in my mind because I remember being around somebody who said, well, I've worked hard today, so I deserve, a malt, a shake. And I thought in my brain, no, you've worked hard today, so you deserve to go home and rest a little bit and then energize yourself doing something else that's not caloric,
Right.
right? So you have to
Yeah.
change what you deserve. I'm
Interesting.
tired, I deserve to sit on the couch. No, maybe you're really not tired. Maybe your body needs to have a little exercise, so maybe you should walk around for 10 minutes or dance a little
Right.
bit in your living room
Oh
or,
my gosh. Totally. Yeah.
stretch instead because movement can be very energizing. So that feeling that you have of tiredness, maybe midday, maybe not, maybe it's because you haven't done enough with your body,
Right.
So I've tried to reframe that a bit, but there are definite times where you have to say, no, I'm going to sit down for 15 minutes and recharge and
Oh,
get
I know.
up and
It's
do
so
stuff.
easy
And,
to just
right,
sit on the couch or lay in bed and have a couch rot day or whatever. It's like too
right.
easy. And I know for me, if I do that too long, I actually am in more pain in my body and in my
Right.
mind because
Yeah.
it's like, oh, it sounds really nice, like just to relax all day or just to relax after work. And it is and it isn't because it's kind of this double-edged sword where you're like, okay, yeah, I do want to just chill. But then it's like, oh, when I stand up again, it's like, ooh, oh,
Yeah.
I should have moved my body more that day because I also tend to lose motivation to move my body if I haven't all day or if I stayed watching TV too long or whatever it is. So, yeah, I think that's why I was like, oh, maybe I'll work out later in the day. That sounds fine too. But I think for me, with my schedule right now, it's like mornings are probably the best bet for me because it's out of the way and done, and I already did it, and then I don't have to worry about doing it the rest of the day. And yeah, that pressure of just trying to do all the things. It's like at least I did the workout and I feel good about that and I stretched and all of that, and then I can move forward with my day and still try to be active, or because resting is important. I mean, it is. It's part of
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
part of being human. You have to rest to, rejuvenate your muscles and your mind and all of that too. It's a big part of that nice prevention cycle. What did I see? A woman in her 50s. She just moved to New York City to pursue a career on Broadway. And she's dancing, she's taking all these dance classes, and she's doing it. And I think she had her first debut in a musical, I think for Chicago, where she had a little snippet on stage for 10, 15 minutes, I think. But it's like, yeah, I think seeing all these people and all their stories and seeing how they're living their lives, it does remind you that age is just a number, and it's really about your lifestyle and how you choose to show up for yourself that really impacts your age in a way. And because so many people are doing so many different things at all different ages, and it doesn't really matter as long as you know what your limits and boundaries are, but you can really pick up a lot of different skills at older ages. I think we
Oh,
were
sure.
shown that, oh, it's only in your 30s that you can do stuff, or only this or that. It's like, no, like you can do things. This is another thing I really loathe, but people in my age group constantly are saying, I'm so old. Oh my gosh, how old are you? Oh, we're so old. Oh, we're so. I'm like, no, we're not. What the heck are you talking about? Like, yeah, we're in our 30s. Like, it's kind of the prime of our lives. And that's where I feel age pressure because I'm like, oh my God, I'm the prime of my life. Like, I want to do all these things. I want to write a book. I want to go traveling. I, need to make money. I have to have like financial security and stability and all. And that's where I feel like this pressure of aging because I'm like, oh my God, like, is that going to happen for me? When is that going to happen? I need it to happen now. And it can't happen later because I'm going to be older later and I want to experience things now and not later. All of those things that I think go hand in hand with aging and mortality and this like timeline that we have to be this. In our last podcast, we talked about this linear thinking. But I don't think people's lives are linear. But age is, but we don't have to matriculate in the same way that our age does. I'm tired.
Well, yes, I agree with mostly everything you said. I would reframe the word we're getting old to I'm older. That's why I've changed that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so old. No, I'm just older because
Yeah.
yay, I'm older. And that's a good thing. I don't want to see it as a negative. I understand that. I think just being human and the fact that we cognate and we've created meaning for things, we've created this idea, philosophy, whatever it is, that we have to get something done, monumentally done, or we have to create all these memories, or we have to have all these experiences before we come to the end of our lives. And the truth is, I don't think any other animal on earth thinks that. No, we can't know for sure if an elephant's thinking that. We know we know that animals have feelings, but I don't think they cognate their own mortality, and that's the fortunate and unfortunate thing about being a human. And so we didn't ask to be here, right? We're all here by circumstance, by procreation. That's all it is. That's why we're here. And what we choose to do with that is our choice. And we've created all these ideas and philosophies and shoulds around what we need to get done before we're not here. And we have to ask ourselves, is that necessary, or is that what I want to do, and create something that's meaningful for each individual, not what society's meaning is, which is super difficult to extract yourself from. I'm not saying that.
It is. It's like ego driven. Yeah.
Right. I'm not saying I'm doing it. I'm saying I understand intellectually that it's not necessary. And with social media, we see so many of our friends and family doing all these things, and we think, wow, I should be doing those things too. Why aren't I doing them? Or I haven't had that experience, and I've got to create that experience. But the truth is that we all create our own
meaning
in our own experience, whatever that is for us. And if we don't get to it, we don't get to it. And if we get to it, that's great if we wanted it. And we just have to give ourselves permission that it's just impossible to do. It's impossible to live 10 different lives in one lifetime. It's just impossible. You can't be that. So you have to decide what feels right and comfortable to you and do it. So in terms of aging, sure, because I think to myself, wow, did I do anything? And then I know I was present for all these things. And how did I get to be this age with all this that happened ahead of me? But we do live in a structural society, and we do sort of conform to that structure. And I went through stages in my life, some of which I did voluntarily, and some things that happened to me involuntarily, and I responded to those things. And now I'm where I am now, and now the idea is, what am I going to do with the time that I have now, and mitigate the natural process of aging. And I'm not saying the natural process of becoming decrepit. I'm talking about the natural process that your body naturally goes through. I always think of my body as a car. You know, the car is going to need new tires. It's going to blow a gasket. The air filter is going to get dirty. There's things that you have to do. And thankfully, I'm privileged enough to be able to go to a doctor if I'm not feeling well, or get medical care. And so that in itself gives you a leg up. Just being able to have access to certain things that keep you healthy. Right. But there's things that are going to happen to you, and that's where the anxiety comes in, that you don't really have a lot of control over. You can exercise, you can try to eat well, you can try not to drink so much or at all. You can do these things, and your body is still going to respond genetically the way your body is, and environmentally the way your body is. So it's a mixed bag. I'll never forget, and you're too young to remember any of this, but Phil Donahue, you might know that Phil Donahue had a show on TV. He was like one of the first talk show people. And he had guests on that were talking about healthy lifestyles. And he said, well, you can do everything right to live to 100, but it's going to feel like 200. In other words, it's going to be a slog.
Yeah.
You made it to 100, but at what cost? So you do have to build in enjoyment.
Yes.
Right.
Vital.
And you have to be able, laughter, enjoyment, things that you enjoy doing by yourself and with people. I think just having moderation in life in general is the ticket. I really think having a really positive outlook is helpful. I think that, I know this sounds really like platitudes, but I think for myself, when I see myself in terms of other people, I think I do happen to have a little extra shot of serotonin, and which is great.
You gave the rest to me.
Maybe so. And I just feel like thankful for that, because that keeps me sort of buoyed up through most of life's crap that gets thrown at you. And so I'm happy for that. But I may have been given other things genetically that I'm not so tickled about. And I have to, like Dr. Phil once said, and I'm not a huge Dr. Phil fan, but there are certain things he has said that I can get behind. And one of them is that, you might be genetically disposed to something, but you can do something about that with your lifestyle. And I agree with him on that. And I think that we have a lot of people on social media now. Just go onto Instagram and just sit there for 1 minute. You're going to see 10 or 15 people trying to show you, how to live your life more healthily. Okay, great. Yeah. So, So I think he was right about that. So I think you can modify some of your genetic yuckies with good lifestyle choices, but you're also human, and there are times we just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Right? So there are going to be times where, even though you know what you should be doing and what you will make it better for you, you just don't want to, and you're going to take time off, and you're going to just enjoy doing things that aren't necessarily prescriptive for your bodily and mental well-being. It might be nice to, maybe your mental well-being will be better off if you take downtime.
Right.
But what I'm saying is you just have to do things that feel natural at times and not necessarily so prescriptive.
Sure. I understand that.
You know.
I agree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think
Yeah.
that the whole just aging, I think we talked about this once before. I remember driving home one day from work, and I thought to myself, wow, I'm 21. In 4 years, I'm going to be 25. And that just seemed like 25. Holy guacamole. And I've never had that same experience since then. I've never
Interesting.
stopped and thought, oh, I'm 35. In 5 years, I'm going to be 40. I don't remember actually stopping and having that moment. I think I may have thought about it fleetingly, but it was never as, somehow 25 seemed to be a really big deal to me back then.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then I say to myself, wow, I'm past 65 now.
right. Yeah.
And how the heck did that all
happen?
Right?
Right,
Yeah.
I
And
know.
I think the thing I'd like to say, most importantly, I guess, is that as you age, especially for women, I think they become sort of invisible. We've talked about that before. And I think as you get even older, I think men start to become invisible too. And I think that the misnomer that we have, I don't know if that's the right word, but the understanding that we have is your body might be aging, but the person who you are in your mind has not aged.
Right.
I mean, some people do get cranky, and there are life changes and hormonal issues. Because I was looking that up. Do you get more emotional when you get older? Because the other day I was thinking, am I getting more emotional now that I'm older? Or do you get more depressed? There are tendencies at certain ages to get more depressed and have more emotional feelings. But I think that what I would really like people that are younger than I am to understand is that just because you see a person whose hair might be gray or white, or whose skin might be wrinkled, or who might not be able to walk as quickly as you do, doesn't mean they're not vital, and doesn't mean they're not the same person they were on the inside that you are now in your 20s or 30s or 40s. Right? Because when I think of myself as my age, my general philosophies and my personality, I don't think have changed all that much.
Yeah, your core personality is the same.
Right, is the same. So I guess that's what frustrates me, because I have been and I have been susceptible to ageist ideas around me. And it's really nice that people want to open doors for me and do things like that. I think that's
You're like, just ask
wonderful.
first.
Right. Or
Yeah.
recently we had a situation where we were walking towards a restaurant, which was in a strip center with other stores, and this young couple came out of one of the stores, and they kept the door open for us. And I said, oh, that's super nice of you, but we're not going in there. We're going over there. I mean, they were trying to do a good deed.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But I couldn't accept that deed because that's not what I wanted to do. So, I think there's, What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I think we assume a lot about older people, and we assume that they need assistance when maybe they don't, and we don't even ask first. That's the other thing, too. I mean, holding the door open, that's nice for any age, I guess. But
Right.
what I don't like is when men open the door for me and then expect me to go first. And I'm like, you're doing that because you're assuming my gender, number one. And number two, it's like, and then they get weird if I open the door for them. They're like, oh, no, you go ahead of me. I'm like,
Yeah, I've had
what?
that.
What's that about? I don't like that at all. But that happens a lot to me. And then, yeah,
Well,
with
that's erasing.
yeah, and it's a societal thing. But I feel like with people who are older, it's like we just kind of shove them away. We put them in homes run by private companies, and it's just like we just kind of say, oh yeah, we don't, old people, what do they have to offer? Where it's like, well, actually, they probably have a lot to offer, just like any of us. And putting them away and shutting them out, it's kind of like what we do with death. We just kind of don't acknowledge it exists. And we don't acknowledge that older people exist, really, that they're not really part of our society or our discourse in any way.
Right. I mean, it's difficult, the whole assisted living thing, and that's a huge conversation, but just for a little snippet of it, there is a practicality in that we don't want those people who are living alone and having difficulties to be alone.
Sure, right.
So this is a way for them to get attention without having to live by themselves. And there's also rules about that. I mean, if you are not able to come into a facility on your own power, you don't get, you can't get in. So there's only so much care that an assisted living organization can give, and before you have to go into some other kind of facility. So there are practicalities, and they're hard decisions for families to make for elderly people. You know, look,
Absolutely.
I didn't get the privilege of having my parents long enough to deal with a long-term elderly issue. So on one end of it, I didn't have to deal with that, but on the other hand, I didn't get them very long enough to have to deal with that.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a weird situation, because I know many friends of mine who are dealing with parents who are elderly, and they have to make decisions for them, because there's going to come that time. I'm hoping to be able to delay that time as long as, but nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
So,
I know. That's
right.
As your child, I'm like, oh, I'm glad you're staying active. Stay active. Do those crossword puzzles. Keep your brain going. Because as your child, it's like,
Right.
you know, it's hard to see your parent age, and I've been seeing you age my whole life, essentially.
Right. I mean,
But
yes.
but it's like the most times that I remember really seeing differences was when we'd go long stretches when I went away to college, and then I would see new things about your face, and I'm like, oh my God, my mom's getting older. Holy shit. You know, that's scary. It's good. Like, I'm really glad, but there's a lot of trauma from like only having one parent to navigate. I don't want to lose you too early, too young. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So it's like, yeah. So just
No,
do
I
your
get
thing.
that.
Yeah.
I don't want to either, because I have parents that were young,
I know.
and essentially, for today's standards, who, I'm sure my father had a heart attack early in his life, in his late 40s. And so the fact that he lived to almost be 71 probably was amazing. And my mother, on the other hand, I think that she could have lived longer had she not
Gone to the
ignored
doctor.
treatment.
Yeah.
Right, not ignored treatment of cancer, and died at 68. So it's scary, because I think to myself, well, these were self-imposed reasons they died younger, because my father started smoking as a teenager and that kind of stuff, and I don't do those things. I don't have the same lifestyle things that they did their lives. So maybe that's giving me, a little extra longevity. I think of my mother's mother was in her 80s when she died. My great grandmother was in her 80s when she died. My aunt was in her 90s. I mean, hopefully, I those things, I'm more attached to that than I am to the other. But you just never, you never know where your genetics are going to take you. But that's an interesting thing, because parents also see their children aging, and it's an interesting thing to see that happening too. And for a while, it's not aging so much as it's maturing and growing up and becoming something else. And then all of a sudden it tips the scale, and then you start seeing your child perhaps with gray hair, or your son's beard has a little gray in it, and you're
Yeah.
going, oh, holy moly, okay. So, but I think because of my personality and that extra serotonin that we're talking about, I think I'm able to sort of rejoice in those things rather than see those as a detriment for others, of course. Now, for
Yeah.
myself, I try to keep a uplifted viewpoint of that as well. There are concerns about that aging process in terms of how you look and all that, but that's because we have decided that this is a youth promoted society and that we
Yeah,
don't want to
youth-centric.
see things that are not pretty on
Mm-hmm.
people's faces,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's really unfortunate. I remember, and I think we still, I must have it here. Your grandma bought you a book about grandmothers. I don't know if you remember it, but it was a picture book in the story about all these different grandmothers and grandmothers who have hair on their chins and grandmother who have wrinkles on their faces and grandmothers who are artists and grandmothers. And I think she was trying back then to normalize the idea that grandmas aren't just all one thing
Right.
and that being a grandma and looking older is okay and you don't have to be
Yeah.
afraid of
Natural.
that.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember going through a period of my life when I was like 8 years old that I was scared to death of the idea of looking old, like old, like
Oh, wow.
80, 90 years old. And I was afraid of
Yeah.
skulls. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
knew that there was a skull underneath my face, and I was really panic stricken about that idea of getting old. And my mother said to me, "Well, that's not going to happen for a really long time." I remember her saying it, elongating it. It's not going to happen for a really long time, and that sort of put my mind to
Mm-hmm.
ease. That's all she had to say to me. We didn't have to get into anything else. That was it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's right. It when you get to be older, you look back and say, "Wow, that was fast."
Right.
But
Right.
while you're going through it, you don't think it's fast.
Well, yeah, and I think it's interesting too because I mean, we have the experience of living through a pandemic together that I think is kind of really in a part of our psyche now and stuff that we're probably still working through that I don't even realize that I'm still working through. But I turned 30 days before lockdown,
Yes.
and there was a whole host of emotions going through my body and mind at the time where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm trying not to partake in those stories that you have to have all these things done by the time you turn 30 or this pressure of being on these like 30 under 30 lists or, accomplishing all these things before you reach a certain age. But our society likes to ingrain this idea that people can accomplish a lot before 30, when in reality, I think a lot of those people have a huge network of people helping them. Some people don't, but a lot of it comes down to money and access and
Right.
opportunity and privilege. We don't really recognize that, right? We like to think that this one person did it all by themselves and that's why they're a multimillionaire, and that's just not true. But
Right.
the point is that I think turning 30 days before lockdown and then essentially having 2, 3 birthdays during the 4 years of the pandemic. I mean, it's still happening now today, but time and aging and then experiencing 4 layoffs, it created this cacophonous, anxiety-ridden pit in my chest, thinking that the time was like moving fast and slow. I mean, I didn't see you for a year. That was weird. I never thought I'd ever experience a year where I didn't see you in person.
Right.
That was tough. I didn't like that at all. And so then you're in your own world for months and months and months on end, trying to keep up with everything, trying to work, doing all these things, but time keeps passing, but it's not the normal passage of time because we're living in a pandemic, which is like super anxiety inducing and all of that stuff. And then you come out of it on the other side. And even though we're still essentially in a pandemic in a lot of ways, that time is now different outside of it still. And it's just, so now I wake up and I'm like, I kind of wake up because I'm like, oh my God, I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm still like underemployed. And where did that time go? And I missed out on all these other things that maybe could have happened if we hadn't experienced a pandemic, or all of these things that I think we're still trying to navigate as a society and individually. And so that perpetuates like this aging and all of that stuff. It's so hard to explain, but yeah, it's just, and I think that's why I'm so prone to wanting to keep active and vital in that way too, because I want to be present, and exercising is a really good way to stay present and practice presence, because I'm dealing with so much anxiety about time lost, I guess, or
Yeah.
being an age where I thought I would have more done, whatever that means. But yeah, it's like, oh, it's making me emotional thinking about it, because I'm just like, it's still so present for me, I guess. All those feelings, and yeah, going back there, but still living presently with all those feelings that I was navigating 3, 4 years ago. It's so interesting, and it's a lot.
It's very interesting, and I don't think you should be ashamed or have any feelings about having feelings. I think that I have a lot of resentment because I was on a trajectory
Yeah.
when we got locked down, and I felt very much more energetic and more willing to do certain things, and then we got stuck in that quagmire, and then work became difficult, and it was never really the same when we came back, and the
Yeah.
children were acting out, which propelled me into wanting to retire that much more. And then losing, I think when you're older, especially, you're just biologically, your acceleration of aging is quicker. So you age, but you age slightly faster exponentially as you get older. So my feelings in my head, which are aging as well, are like, do I really want to do those things that I thought were so important that I wanted to do back in 2020, 4 years
Right.
ago? And maybe I've lost my zeal for some of that, and that makes me feel sad. And maybe it's not that I lost my zeal, but maybe my body won't be able to keep up the way I wanted it to keep up back 4 years
Yeah.
ago. Right.
Right.
And so there is resentment for that. I feel like there's like this compression of time, but there's this like acceleration of time. And
Yes.
yeah, I think that a lot of us are feeling that. I think that environmentally, where you see people, I think there's a lot of acting out that's going on right now in society over
Yes.
what's happened. Some people
Road
are not
rage
dealing
is so
very,
high right now.
yeah, they're not dealing well with that, and it's unfortunate. I mean, is there a way that we can have
I see your point.
a societal,
Well, we
reload?
need a lot of resources, right? I mean, we need
We
like
do. That's
UBI,
yes, of course.
universal basic income.
Yes.
There's nothing in place for people to really get a reprieve or really to process. We were just like forced to just go back into work like nothing happened, and then
Like
go
it
back
happened.
into the same old, same old. And it's like, hello,
Yeah.
did you live through what I lived through? We can't go back. Like, and that's
No.
also frustrating too. And we talk about aging, and it's like, the reason why the retirement is such a sham is because by the time you get to retirement age, you can't go climb mountains if you want to. You can't go travel the way you wanted to when you were in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
just
heck no.
different, right? So
Right.
the feeling of, okay, yeah, losing time at different ages too, also is fascinating, because I'm 34. I feel like I'm losing time because I don't have the money or the ability to like access like going traveling like I'd want to, but it's like I want to do it now while I have the mind and the
Right.
body to be able to access those things, versus, okay, yeah, well, maybe your business will take off in 5 years. It's like, okay, that's fine. That's still fine, but it's like it keeps going further away from me, and your body's changing, and you want to be able to access a lifestyle that you can access now in a way that you will make you happy. And if climbing mountains and hiking and all that stuff, that's what I like to do. Not everyone likes to do that, but I
Right.
want to do that. So it's like I have to kind of do that in the next 20 years, because or I can't do that shit when I'm retired. You know what I mean? I mean, depending on how my body
Well,
is
you
and
might
how
be
I
able
take care
to,
of it.
and you do it different.
But
You do it differently.
You do it differently. But that's the thing. It's like,
Right.
we shouldn't have to do it. We can do it differently. But it's like this idea that like, oh, you can get to all that when you're not working anymore. It's like, no, you can't.
Well, yes.
Like, you're just,
No.
it's just different. You know what I mean?
It's going to be different, and also I think that maybe what might make you feel a little bit better is your mind will catch up with your body at some point. So in other
Yeah.
words, you'll be okay if you get to climb, but you only get to climb blah blah. You'll start to understand your limitations, and it
Yeah.
won't be a drawback, because you'll be able to glean from those experiences different things that you might have not gleaned from that experience when you were younger.
Sure.
I mean, you have to, I will just say, I'll use the word grace. You kind of have to give yourself grace, because whatever your lifestyle is and whatever you fit into it, you're going to have to, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You're going to have to fit pieces in it as you can. And some things you'll be able to do while you're working. And some people will be able to do things while they're parenting. And some things are just going to not happen because your focus is on to something else, and you'll have to make compromises. Right? But you said something about 30 under 30. Yeah, damn social media. I don't remember ever hearing that growing up. These are the things you should or want to do before you turn 30. Those things weren't happening. Maybe they were happening in talking with people in families, and maybe you want to try to do this, or maybe you want to go do this, but there was never there was not so many lists that we could pop up on the internet and look at and feel crappy that we haven't gotten to those things.
Yes. And I just want to mention too, you have to pay to be on those lists. That's something I learned. So it's not actually really that accurate, because people are paying to be on Forbes 30 under 30 list.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Or if
so
I did,
it's
I
like,
forgot.
all these things are fake. I mean, maybe not the people on them, obviously, like they're doing work or whatever. That's fine. More power to them. But yes, I mean, it's like, if you don't know that stuff, it makes you feel really inadequate, right? And then you're comparing yourself to something that's not actually real, which is these people paid to be on these lists. Instead of being nominated in a democracy or something, it's a privilege.
No,
and a different kind of privilege,
Well, it's the same thing when I found out that people were campaigning for the Oscars.
Right.
I'm like, actors would campaign for Oscars. I'm like, what the hell? So everything, when you find out things are orchestrated, it really just bursts the whole excitement and bubble of what you thought, of what you knew, because really there are so many things that are orchestrated, and we just really need to understand that. But I think that
when you get to a certain age, I'm sorry. Yeah, comparing is so bad. Well, I was going to say, when you get to a certain age, you kind of lose interest in comparing yourself, because you're like, fuck it, I'm just going to do my own thing, and I don't care. And that kind of feels relieving. But I don't know, have you had that experience?
Well, I'm having an experience right now, and maybe I'm premature in talking about it, but after this thing happens, we'll come back and I'll let you know how it was. Okay. So I'm going to my 50th high school reunion tomorrow.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, and
I love that you want to go to those. Like, I have no interest in going to any of my high school reunions.
I know, and I think we mentioned it on another episode where I said I wasn't sure why either, but I think it's nostalgia for me.
Sure, I understand that.
Yeah, it's just nostalgia. It's a connectedness, not necessarily to people, but there are people involved, but also to a certain time where I sort of felt, well, academically and socially, in terms of committees and group work, I felt included. Yeah. But I didn't always feel included in groups and, well, let me say that differently. Socially, when I decided to be on a committee, or I was like a president of a committee, or I actively sought to be a part of like our graduation when we graduated, I felt included. Sure. But when I wasn't doing any of that, it was very difficult for me to feel included in groups at school. I didn't feel that. I guess I felt awkward, and maybe people thought I was awkward. I don't know. I had friends, and I had a small bunch of friends, which I think is adequate when you're going to school. But I never felt like I was with a particular large group of people or faction at my school. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I was even president of clubs at high school, and I still didn't feel included. So.
Right. Yeah. And so was I. And I'm sure some of those experiences I may have forgotten, but the general feeling of not being popular, I guess that's the word, was how I was. I didn't feel that way. Okay. And then I moved out of the area, which lowered my chances of having connections after high school and into college, because I wasn't with those people. And many of the people who I'm connected with on Facebook with my high school are still living in basically the same area they went to high school in. So they may see each other out and about, and they also orchestrate smaller groups. I think I mentioned that before. But anyway, you were saying this feeling of
Comparing or
comparing, that's the word. You would think at the 50th high school reunion that would not be on my mind. But it is a concern, right? And I went to my 10-year reunion. I did not go to my 20-year reunion. I went to my 30th, my 40th, and now I'll be going to this 50th tomorrow. And I enjoyed being on the committee, and I'm going to help set up tomorrow, and I think that'll be fun. But I still wondered because that comparison of who looks better getting older, who is dressed a certain way, who is blah, blah, and then I had yesterday, after buying, several outfits to decide, or looking in my closet for outfits, I finally decided, you know what? I don't have to prove anything to anybody, and not in a bad, negative way, but just in a freeing, sort of uplifting way, that I just really want to go and have, which is what I've always been like, wanted to go and have conversation with people. And what I've felt throughout almost my entire life was that people were not necessarily just wanting to have conversation with me, but they were also kind of judgy, right? And I'm not saying this necessarily about the people who are going to be there tomorrow. I'm just saying in my life's journey, I have felt like I am able to free myself once I'm with people of what I'm looking like or what I'm wearing, and be able to indulge in who they are as people and have those conversations together. And I don't know, and I'm sure there's people like me that do that too, but I think there's many people who don't, and who are very concerned about what you look like compared to them, and what you're doing compared to them, and all that. And that's the part of reuniting with people that always sort of worries me in the moment. Right. And that doesn't mean it's because I'm insecure and I don't have strength of character. It just means that I'm human, and I'm concerned about the way that I'll be accepted. And I think we all worry about that. But you think at my age, I wouldn't really give a damn about that anymore, right?
Right.
So I decided that was not going to be a problem for me, and I was going to wear what I felt comfortable wearing. And I know there's going to be people that are going to be verpitzt, and in Yiddish that means all dressed up. And there's going to be people that are probably going to be more casual, and I'll be somewhere in the middle. And I think the ultimate goal is to just be together and to celebrate the fact that we all had, I think that's what the reunions are about. We all celebrated this certain time in our lives together, and we all had different experiences during my 3 years with these people. And then the common experience of walking across and getting your diploma and wearing your cap and gown. I think for me, that's what you back to that moment, that this is something that was a shared experience. And you're familiar with these people. These are faces that you've known your whole life. Right. And the upside of social media is that you now can to connect with them and see them and get little snippets of what they're doing. And so I guess that's why I'm going. But that comparison is still there. And as you're aging, it becomes even more sort of precarious.
Yeah, in a different way. Yeah.
Right, in a different way, because it's going to be about what you look like now, what you looked like then. And,
you want to look good because you want to show off, and
but that's not.
I know.
No, that's not what it is. And so I think changing the reframing, just in general, not talking about reunions, but just in general, the idea that your outer self is more important than your inner self is ludicrous.
Right.
And you want to be clean, you want to be healthy, obviously, but mostly it's about the insides of you. And so not only is it the insides of you to stay healthy and maintain, a certain level of longevity, but it's also the insides of your emotional base and your character that's more important in this world. And being able to connect with people and having a broad outlook so that you can accept all different kinds of people and not be so bloody scared of people that are not a carbon copy of you.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's what breeds longevity. The fact that you can be fluid.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you want to be fluid and flexible as an individual. And sure, we're all products of certain time periods. And sure, some of us have to sort of expand and think differently than we did before. But I think that's what keeps you young.
Yeah.
Yeah, exercise is great. But having an open mind is probably 9/10 of that.
Yeah. Learning new things, being in community, moving your body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
Eating
saying
plant-based.
Not saying stupid things like, well, I didn't have to say it that way before, so why do I have to say it that way now? Well,
do you
times
feel
have
like
changed, people.
Well, I know, and I think what's really great about having these conversations with you, Mom, is that you're not really a defensive person. You're able to take critiques of yourself, and if I say, "Oh, we don't say that anymore," you're like, "Oh, okay, what do we say now?" You know? At least you do that with me. Yeah, I feel like other people who are older, they're like, "Oh, well, I'm still like a nice person, and I didn't know," and it's like, well, okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's why we're telling you.
Right. Or at least they're not saying what difference does. Right. At least they're not saying what difference does it make.
Yeah, yeah. I feel that way too. I mean, there's some things I don't want to change about myself, or there's things that I'm like, how am I going to change that? And it's hard work. That's the thing. It's just hard, right? To change some things about yourself or how you are in relation to other people. But honestly, it's worth it. It's just worth it. It's worth it to investigate yourself and be a better partner or be a better friend or be a better sibling, whatever your relationship is. But yeah, I don't think enough adults do that. Really self-investigate and then take in feedback and then take responsibility and then move on. So I think having that kind of openness to change you're right, it is probably really energizing and vital. And it's how we can stay engaged at older ages and be relevant and be a part of communities and a part of our own lives and all of that.
Oh, yeah. And not be afraid to say to people that are younger than you, I'm not familiar with that, clue me in, right? Because there's so much. It's hard.
Yes. Well, same for me. I mean, it's so hard. I mean, there's so many things that I'm like, oh yeah, that I did change that about myself, and I'm glad I did. Or, yeah, I'm not saying like you're a person, but just like how you communicate. I think that's really all. Just being open to feedback. There's definitely moments in my life where I've been like a snail going back in their shell, and then I'm like, okay, wait, let me just stick out one tentacle and let me hear that again. Okay, let me stick out the other one. Okay, and I see that now. I see. I was scared. I didn't understand. But if I just kind of lean in the discomfort, I can learn something and not get defensive about it. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm not saying it's changing overnight and I still mess up, but I think that's why there's a divide too sometimes between parents and children or older communities and younger communities, because there's not a lot of listening going on. There's just arguments or defensiveness, or people don't want to listen to each other.
There's a lot of stubbornness.
There's stubbornness. Yeah, that's true.
Right. But I've had visceral reaction to things people have told me about something I've done or something I've said, where I actually feel like this, I can't explain anything, but like this block wall go up for a moment, and like, I don't want to think of that differently. And then a few minutes later, I notice it actually, I can physically feel it go down. I'm like, oh, okay, I understand. Because I'm so married to the idea that this is how it is for me. Right. That, or this is how it makes me feel, that I can't possibly fathom the idea that it could be looked at a different way.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And I think that about you. Well, thank you very much. I think that it's interesting when you get shifted. I remember one time, I mean, these are little silly incidences, but like when I first met my husband and we were dating, I went to the grocery store near my house all the time, and I went into the particular driveway, and I went into an area where I would park, right? And we decide one night we're going to go to the store together, and he goes a completely different driveway, completely different, and I was like, what? I mean, for a moment, I felt like my whole head had like spun. Like, what? That's not the way we're supposed to do it, right?
Yeah.
And then and it was like weird. And then I even said to him, "Oh, that's so weird." And he goes, "What's weird?" And I'm like, "I never go in this driveway. I never park over here to go through that door at Albert, whatever it is." And I think that, because we do things routinely and we think things routinely, when somebody comes up to us and changes that in the moment,
ruffles it.
like,
Yeah.
what? But, and the bigger issues are more difficult. I get that. But
Absolutely.
ultimately, if you are willing to listen to information and think of it in terms of how it can be helpful to you and not make it go away. But I think you're absolutely right that we need to be more of a self-reflected society. I don't mean egotistical. I mean self-reflective. So in terms of aging, what did we learn?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was like, to end the aging episode.
Yes.
I mean, we learned movement is important, daily movement, whatever that means for you, being in community.
Being in community, doing things that are different and that are mind challenging.
Yeah.
Like
Learning new
Wordle.
things, going in the different driveway than you normally
Well,
go.
they say that seniors, and I'm a senior, they say that seniors should drive, take a different route home from work, take a different route home from the market, change the street you go down, look at different houses, anything like that that helps your synapses and your dendrites fire are in a different way with a different experience. I mean, as simple as driving down a different street, having conversation with people.
Yeah,
Staying
noticing
social, I
when
think
you're
we said that.
comparing yourself and just let it go.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And just trying to stay vital. And don't be too worried about aging and take it as it comes.
Let's do a collective deep breath, shall we?
Yes.
Inhale. And exhale. It's going to be...
That last one was for me because I need to remember to
breathing is very
relax.
important.
Breathing is very important.
Mm-hmm. See, I already feel so relaxed now.
Yes.
Aging is but a thought.
Yes, a butterfly in the wind.
Butterfly in the wind. We can age. And it's going to be fine.
Fine.
Now we're going to do a meditation. No, I'm kidding. Okay.